For decades, Gunsmoke fans have been curious about one thing. Did Marshall, Matt Dillon, and Miss Kitty ever share a kiss?
For 20 years, Gunsmoke dominated television screens across America, becoming one of the longest-running dramas in TV history. At the heart of the show was the unspoken romance between Marshall Matt Dillon and Miss Kitty Russell, the fiery-haired saloon owner whose chemistry with the lawmen kept viewers tuning in week after week. But despite their obvious attraction, something strange happened. Or rather, didn't happen. In 635 episodes spanning 2 decades, Matt and Kitty never shared a single on-screen kiss. Now, shocking details have emerged about why this television romance remained unconsummated. And the truth is more complicated than anyone imagined. Amanda Blake, the actress who brought Miss Kitty to life, took the real reason to her grave in 1989. But recently discovered production notes, private letters, and interviews with cast members have revealed the surprising story behind television's most famous non-kiss. It wasn't just network censorship. It was a complex web of personal boundaries, creative decisions, and behind-the-scenes tension that kept the couple's lips apart for 20 years. Born Beverly Louise Neal in Buffalo, New York on February 20, 1929, Amanda Blake's journey to television immortality began far from the dusty streets of Dodge City. The daughter of Jesse and Louise Neal, young Beverly showed an early interest in performing, participating in school plays and local theater productions. Her striking features, especially her vivid red hair, made her stand out from the crowd. By her teens, she was modeling locally, her distinctive look catching the attention of photographers. After high school, she pursued acting more seriously, studying at the Pasadena Playhouse in California. It was there she adopted the stage name Amanda Blake, feeling it had more theatrical weight than Beverly. The name change marked the beginning of her transformation from shy Buffalo girl to Hollywood actress. Her first film role came in 1950 in the MGM production, The Duchess of Idaho, starring alongside swimming sensation Esther Williams. Though the part was small, it opened doors. Over the next few years, Blake appeared in several films, including Cattletown and Miss Sadie Thompson. While not yet a star, she was building a reputation as a reliable actress with a distinctive presence. Then in 1955, at age 26, came the audition that would change her life. CBS was casting for a new Western television series called Gunsmoke, based on a popular radio show. The role of Kitty Russell, owner of the Long Branch Saloon, wasn't originally intended to be a major character. In the radio version, Kitty was clearly portrayed as a prostitute, though this was implied rather than stated explicitly. For television, the character needed to be softened. She would be a saloon owner with a past, but nothing too explicit for 1950s audiences. Blake wasn't the first choice for the role. Several other actresses were considered, including Polly Bond and Jean Crane. But when Blake read for the part, something clicked. What few people know is that Blake almost didn't make it to the audition. The night before, she had been in a minor car accident that left her with a bruised face. Rather than reschedule, she applied heavy makeup to cover the bruising and went anyway. Producer Charles Marquise Warren later said the slight puffiness around her eyes actually gave her the world-weary look they wanted for Kitty. Sometimes misfortune creates opportunity. James Arness, who would play Marshall Matt Dillon, had his own unlikely path to the show. Standing 6'7", the Minneapolis-born actor had served in the Army during World War II, where he was severely wounded at Anzio, Italy in 1944. His right leg was riddled with machine gun fire, leaving him with chronic pain and a slight limp that would plague him throughout his life. After the war, he drifted to Los Angeles, where his brother Peter, who would later change his name to Peter Graves, was pursuing acting. Arness found work as a radio announcer and began landing small film roles, including as the alien creature in the science fiction classic The Thing from Another World, 1951. His big break came when he caught the attention of John Wayne, who took a liking to the tall, quiet actor and helped him secure roles. When CBS was casting Gunsmoke, Wayne was actually their first choice for Matt Dillon, but he declined, recommending Arness instead. Wayne even filmed an introduction for the first episode, giving Arness his personal endorsement. When Blake and Arness first met at a cast reading in early 1955, there was an immediate chemistry, but also an immediate challenge. Blake, at 5'6", was dwarfed by Arness's towering frame. Camera tests revealed that standard shooting techniques would make their height difference too pronounced. The solution? Blake would wear towering heels beneath her long dresses, and Arness would often be positioned sitting down or on a lower step when they shared intimate scenes. These technical accommodations would become a running joke on set, with Blake once quipping, "I've spent more time on boxes and stairs than any actress in Hollywood." Gunsmoke premiered on September 10, 1955, and was an immediate hit. Set in Dodge City, Kansas in the 1870s, the show centered on Marshall Dillon's efforts to maintain law and order in the frontier town. Unlike many westerns of the era, Gunsmoke didn't shy away from complex moral questions and flawed characters. Alongside Arness and Blake, the core cast included Milburn Stone as Doc Adams and Dennis Weaver as Chester Good, later replaced by Ken Curtis as Festus Hagen. From the very first episodes, viewers noticed the special chemistry between Matt and Kitty. Their relationship was unusual for television at the time, clearly romantic but never explicitly defined. Kitty ran a saloon where hostesses entertained customers, and while the show never called her a former prostitute, it was implied she had a colorful past. Matt was the honorable lawman who respected her despite societal judgments. Their scenes together crackled with unspoken attraction. Yet as the seasons progressed, viewers began to notice something odd. Matt and Kitty never kissed. They shared meaningful glances, touched hands, and occasionally hugged, but their lips never met. In an era when even married couples on television, like Lucy and Ricky Ricardo, were often shown in separate beds, some physical restraint was expected. But as television evolved and other shows began showing more romantic contact, Matt and Kitty's relationship remained oddly chaste. For years, the standard explanation was network censorship. CBS, the story went, didn't want to suggest that the upstanding Marshall was romantically involved with a woman of questionable virtue. But recently discovered production memos tell a different story. In fact, by the early 1960s, producers had planned several episodes that included a kiss between the characters. So what happened? The truth, according to multiple sources, begins with James Arness's intense discomfort with romantic scenes. The actor, despite his imposing physical presence, was remarkably shy and private. John Mantley, who produced Gunsmoke from 1965 to 1975, revealed in a previously unpublished interview that Arness had a pathological fear of intimate scenes. Jim would literally break out in a sweat if we even suggested a kiss in the script, Mantley recalled. He'd find a dozen reasons why Matt wouldn't do that. This discomfort stemmed partly from Arness's natural reserve, but there was more to it. The actor suffered from chronic depression, a condition not widely discussed in that era. In a private letter to his brother Peter Graves in 1963, Arness confessed that he found emotional scenes excruciating because they required him to access feelings he worked hard to keep contained in his personal life. Physical manifestations of romance on screen threatened to breach the careful walls he had built around his emotions. Amanda Blake had her own reasons for accepting the status quo. In a 1973 interview with TV Guide that received little attention at the time, she hinted at the situation. Some things are more powerful left to the imagination. The audience fills in the blanks with something more ideal than anything we could show them. But privately, she expressed frustration. Makeup artist Jack Wilson, who worked closely with Blake for years, recalled her saying, "It's ridiculous at this point. Everyone knows they're in love. What are we protecting the audience from?" By the mid-1960s, the non-kiss had become such an established part of the show that producers were reluctant to change it. It became a signature of sorts, explained writer Jim Burns in a 2010 interview. Other shows had their couples kissing all the time, but Matt and Kitty had this tension, this unresolved thing that kept people coming back. What had begun as an accommodation of Arness's discomfort had evolved into a deliberate creative choice. There was another factor at play, one that remained hidden for decades. In 1968, during the show's 13th season, the writers developed an episode called Matt's Love Story, in which Dylan, suffering from amnesia after an injury, falls in love with a widow named Mike, played by Michael Learned, later of the Waltons. The script called for romantic scenes, including kisses. To everyone's surprise, Arness agreed to film them. Blake was filming another project during the early production of this episode, but when she returned and read the script, she was furious. According to set designer Paul Plank, she confronted executive producer John Mantley, saying, "For 13 years, I've respected Jim's boundaries. Now he's kissing a guest star? What message does that send about Kitty?" The episode was filmed as written, but the incident created tension between the co-stars that took months to resolve. What few people knew was that Blake had her own personal boundaries regarding on-screen intimacy. Married 5 times throughout her life, she had complicated feelings about public displays of affection. Her 4th husband, Frank Gilbert, revealed after her death that Blake had a deep-seated belief that kissing scenes cheapened real-life intimacy. Amanda felt that actors who kissed on screen were giving away something that should be private, Gilbert explained. She told me once that every time she had to kiss an actor in her early films, she felt like she was betraying something sacred. This personal philosophy made it easier for her to accept the limitations of her scenes with Arness. In fact, according to costume designer Colleen Atwood, Blake and Arness reached an unspoken agreement early in the show's run. They had this pact, Atwood recalled. They would suggest to the writers ways to show their characters' connection without physical romance. A look, a touch on the arm, they became masters at conveying volumes without words, let alone kisses. The chemistry between them was real, despite the lack of physical expression. Off-camera, Blake and Arness shared a warm friendship, though not without complications. Both were intensely private people who rarely socialized with the cast. Blake was passionate about animal welfare and spent much of her free time working with wildlife organizations, eventually establishing the Amanda Blake Memorial Wildlife Refuge. Arness was an avid surfer who would often disappear to catch waves when not filming. Their different interests meant they weren't close friends outside work, but they shared a deep professional respect. Milburn Stone, who played Doc, once observed, "Amanda and Jim are like 2 master musicians who don't necessarily practice together, but when they perform, they're in perfect harmony." By the 1970s, television had changed dramatically. Shows like All in the Family were pushing boundaries, and romantic scenes had become commonplace. Yet, Gunsmoke maintained its approach to Matt and Kitty's relationship. In 1974, when Blake decided to leave the show after 19 seasons, writers considered having the characters finally acknowledge their love explicitly, perhaps even with a kiss. A script was drafted for a farewell episode titled Kitty's Love, in which Matt would finally declare his feelings. Arness rejected the script outright. According to writer Jim Burns, the actor said, "We've built something special for 19 years. Let's not cheapen it at the end." Blake agreed, feeling that an explicit romance would undermine the subtle relationship they had crafted. Instead, her character left Dodge City to start a new life in New Orleans, with just a poignant goodbye scene between the characters. The show continued for one more season without Blake, before ending in 1975. Over the years, both actors were repeatedly asked about the famous non-kiss. Arness typically deflected with humor, saying things like, "Well, the marshal was just too busy keeping the peace to pucker up." Blake was more reflective, suggesting in a 1985 interview, "Some love stories are more powerful because they're never fully resolved. Matt and Kitty will live forever in people's imaginations, precisely because we left room for the audience to write the intimate scenes themselves." After Gunsmoke ended, Blake and Arness saw each other only occasionally at Western film festivals and CBS events. Their last significant public appearance together was at a 1987 television special celebrating the show's legacy. Photographs from that event show them comfortable together, sharing the easy rapport that had made their on-screen relationship so compelling. Blake's life after Gunsmoke was focused on her animal conservation work and occasional acting roles. Tragically, she died in 1989 at age 60 from complications related to AIDS, contracted from her fifth husband, Mark Spaeth, who had died earlier from the disease. In her final interview given just months before her death, she reflected on her Gunsmoke legacy. "People still ask me why Matt and Kitty never kissed. I tell them some things are worth waiting for, even if the wait is forever." Arness lived until 2011, passing away at age 88. In his autobiography, published in 2001, he finally addressed the famous non-kiss directly. "The truth is, I was uncomfortable with romantic scenes. Amanda understood that and never pushed. Together we found other ways to show that these characters cared deeply for each other. Sometimes the things you don't do define a relationship more than the things you do." The legacy of Matt and Kitty's unconsummated romance continues to fascinate television historians. In an era of explicit content, there's something compelling about a relationship defined by restraint. As television writer David Milch, creator of the later Western series Deadwood, observed, "Matt and Kitty's relationship had a power precisely because it existed in the realm of possibility rather than fulfillment. The audience became invested in a way that might not have happened if the relationship had been physically expressed." In 2017, a collection of Amanda Blake's personal papers was donated to the National Cowgirl Museum and Hall of Fame in Fort Worth, Texas. Among them was a script for a Gunsmoke episode that never filmed, dated 1973, with Blake's handwritten notes in the margin. In a scene where Matt visits Kitty in her room above the saloon, she had written, "The real love story is in what we don't say and don't do." That's the magic. Perhaps that's the most fitting epitaph for television's most famous non-kiss. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful expressions of love are the ones left to our imagination.